everyone, and thank you for joining our live masterclass today on audience insights using both Similarweb and Mention. We have a great attendance of those who are online today that have joined us, so let's get started. So a quick introduction to myself. My name is Chloe Nichols and I'm a product marketing manager here at Similarweb for the digital research intelligence solution. For those that are not familiar with Similarweb, we help business leaders with the most reliable data, offering a 360-degree view of the digital world. So our platform provides insights across websites, apps, industries and markets at a global scale to enable you to discover untapped opportunities to grow your brand and build your audience. So I'm here joined with Francesca Chung, Head of Content at Mention. Welcome, Fran. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It'd be great to get a brief introduction on yourself.
Hi, Chloe, and thanks for having me on the webinar today. I'm Francesca. So I head content here at Mention. I'm in charge of our inbound content strategy, which involves webinars such as these, ebooks, and our blog as well. So I'm very happy to be here and to share some of my insights into audience analytics, which I use on a daily basis in my work. A little bit about Mention if you're not familiar with our company, with our brand. We are a social listening and media monitoring platform, which allows you to monitor what's being said about your brand, about any other topic, or about your competitors online over 1,000 different sources. And during today's webinar, we'll also be showing you how you can use social listening for your audience analytics.
Excellent. Thank you, Fran. So again, in today's session, I'll cover how you can use Similarweb to build a profile of your audience. And in part 2 of the session, Fran's going to dive into how to use social listening tools like Mention to improve your brand's perception online. So let's go. So we've all been there, done the market research, the consumer polls and the surveys, the statistical analysis. But when it comes to launching a new product, it can sometimes fall flat on its face. So who can forget some of these flops? But what's really interesting is that as a successful brand launch, it's often tied to brand association and how your audience relates to your brand. At Similarweb, we can actually see within the data how specific keywords and search terms are the driving force when it comes to perception of what your brand stands for. So we have 2 examples today of Joby Aviation. So they're a California-based aerospace company, and they've developed this new vertical landing takeoff system. They're kind of known as the Uber the Sky, the Jetsons, flying taxi. And then secondly, we've got Skittles. So the Taste the Rainbow tagline there. And I'm going to talk through both case studies and what we've seen in terms of brand perception. So we have 3 charts here, and I'd be really curious to know which do you think represents Joby Aviation search results. Is it A, B, or C? I do think the results may surprise you. Here we can see the search trend for the Jetsons, flying taxi, and Joby Aviation, and how the search trend for Joby Aviation didn't quite yield the same results. In fact, what's really interesting is that from the search trend and the data that we can see, that the terms flying taxi and Jetsons created a much higher search interest for the associations than the brand itself. However, on the flip side, here's where you can see where Skittles ran a campaign alongside the Pride celebrations in July. And you can see in the data that there was a spike for both Skittles and Pride. So around 60 and 70% increase in the search trend around the same time, which really shows that there can be a positive association between your brand and timely events. And a fun fact, did you know that all Skittles actually taste the same regardless of their color? We do in fact eat with our eyes. Fran is actually going to highlight Skittles later in the session today, and you'll learn more about how the brand is mentioned online. But it's not always rainbows and sunshine. Here are some top reasons why product launches don't quite go as planned. So it could be due to poor product and market fit, bad timing, or it just didn't quite capture the right audience. Which gets you asking, as a marketeer, the question, how can I prepare for a successful launch that will resonate with the right audience? So in this next section, I'll walk you through the framework and the steps that you can take to understand your audience and ultimately grow your brand using Similarweb. So imagine you're a VP of strategic marketing at a global bike company, and it's your job to launch a new urban bike into a new market, reaching a completely new audience. You may have some assumptions already about this target audience, but to successfully launch this new product and build brand awareness, you'll need to know the following: who your target audience is, how your competitors are approaching them, which channels work best for them, and when's the right time to engage with them. So normally you do several types of research. Maybe you'd look at the industry reports or organize surveys or poll your own customers to learn more about their preferences, habits, or behavior. But this can take a lot of time and resource, and quite often they don't always tell you where your audience hangs out online. So this is the framework that our customers use to help them understand their target audience, qualify that opportunity, and then monitor that audience over time using both Similarweb and Mention. So firstly, you need to identify that audience. Secondly, it's qualifying them. And then thirdly, it's monitoring. So we'll go into these step by step. So understanding your audience in 3 easy steps. The first step is to identify the ideal customer profile of your target audience that you want to capture. So this could be various attributes. For example, this e-bike case study that we're using today, you'll want to be engaging with people who are fit to cycle or have the need to cycle. So for example, they're commuting to work by bike, or they just enjoy cycling as a hobby outside of their work. Other criteria could be also around their lifestyle choices. They want to live a balanced and healthy life, and you can identify your audience through different ways, such as what do they search for online or what do they post on social media. So for this example, we'll dive into the healthy lifestyle of the audience cohort. So using search terms such as healthy snack, you can build a list of keywords. This is an example of putting in the search term healthy snack, and then this brings together a group of keywords which you can essentially use to build a profile of that audience based on what they're searching for on the web. With this list, you can then identify the types of sites and those that actually engage with your target audience, plus identify the total addressable audience and that market that you can reach that is completely net new that you haven't touched before, and look at the search volumes and also identify those trends over time. The next step is to qualify this audience. So either by sites that target your audience or selecting sites based on their age and gender or demographics. It's also great to look at their cross-browsing behavior and exploring your competitors' audience, the types of audience that they also attract and partner with to inform your own go-to-market strategy. Here you can qualify the audience based on the sites that also target the healthy snack consumers. For example, women's health, and you can dive into the demographics of that publication. So here you can see the overall gender distribution and the age split as well for that publication. You can also expand this list by looking at women's health readers and seeing which similar sites they also cross-browse to build a richer view of their online media consumption and habits. And then you can also go a step further and deepen your knowledge into each publication that attracts the healthy snack audience and see how your competitors, in this case, cycle makers, work with the publication, either by identifying other sports and fitness sites that send traffic to women's health, or pulling a list of advertisers that typically promote their product or their services on the site. Finally, you can bring it all together and build a dashboard to monitor the healthy snack audience over time, and then build out all other audience profiles as well. So here's an example of the healthy snacks audience tracking dashboard with the total search volume, which is your total addressable market potential, the total traffic share, which you can see how the traffic and engagement share changes over time, and the demographics. Plus, you can monitor your competitors' audience to see if it changes. We're going to wrap it up there, and I'm going to pass it over to Fran, who's going to talk to you about using social listening and mention to build your brand. So over to you, Fran.
Thanks a lot, Chloe. So yeah, I'm just going to follow on from Chloe's last point on monitoring your audience and kind of adding an extra dimension to this monitoring process using social listening. So if we go to the next slide, first, I wanted to begin by defining what social listening actually is. So we often conflate it with social media monitoring, but in reality, this only forms one part of the listening process. So social listening can be defined as, the process of monitoring social media channels, mentions, and then analyzing the conversation around your brand, competitors, industry, product, and more. So one part of the social listening to not forget is that analysis part. And actually, it mentioned we like to think of social listening as a full cycle process. So we begin with the monitoring, then we analyze those insights, and then we put them into practice to kind of communicate on social media using what we've learned to better reach our audience. And then after that, we track the audience response by monitoring again, and so on. We continue this cycle. So some of the advantages of social listening, particularly in the context of audience analysis, includes the ability to add depth to your audience personas with qualitative insights. So a lot of the analyses that the Similarweb tool offers includes some of these trends and looking at the total addressable audience. Using mention and social listening can help to add some details into those audience personas and help you to really understand how they are and how they behave online. On top of that, these insights can then be used to better position your brand to meet these audience expectations. So on the next slide, I want to show you this kind of analogy that I like to use when we're talking about social listening. We like to think of the quantitative data and trends as almost the baseline sketch. It shows you a bit of a snapshot of how the situation is in any given moment in time. So for example, here in this rough sketch, we can see, there are 7 types of different vehicles, around 10 skyscrapers of various sizes, and 6 trees involved there. We know generally what's going on, but it's a very static snapshot of the situation. So enter social listening. This helps to add a little bit of extra context, some details, some dimensions to this picture to really help to tell a story. So for example, with social listening, we might be able to determine that it's evening, and perhaps this is rush hour traffic. We can see that the cars are moving a little bit slower. Maybe we'll be able to see, the architectural style of these buildings, and it will help us to place us in Europe rather than the United States. So, adding all of these extra details really helps us to give a deeper understanding of the situation. So if we apply this same analogy to audience analytics, you can see how looking at the extra details can really give us a deeper understanding of the audience that we're addressing. So where do we start? There are many things that you can monitor using social listening, starting from your brand and radiating outwards towards your customers, your wider audience, which is what we'll be talking about today, but also, your competitors and even the wider industry and topics that are being discussed online. So there are a lot of different techniques you can use, and particularly with audience analytics, there are 3 kind of elements of social listening that will really help with your analysis. So the first is brand monitoring, the second topic monitoring, and the last one influencer monitoring. So I'll be going through each of these 3 different types of monitoring and looking at how that can help with your audience analytics. So let's start with brand monitoring. It works really well when you're an established brand. You want to keep track of your reputation and as well have a deeper understanding of the current situation. This is not to say that if you're a smaller brand or if you're just starting out, that brand monitoring isn't for you. It just goes to say that the bigger the brand you are, the more it can add value, because by default, more people are talking about you online, more people are mentioning you. So you have more data to work with. But for smaller brands, definitely get started with brand monitoring. It's the best way to keep on top of your reputation. So generally, brand monitoring is going to help you to answer questions such as, how do people or your audience currently perceive your brand? And, if this is not what you expect, or this is not in your strategy, what can you then do to change the narrative? There are kind of two ways of looking at it. Perhaps you want to leave the power to the people and you adjust your brand to fit with the audience expectations, or you adjust your PR and you adjust your communication strategy to kind of adjust the way that your brand is positioned, and perhaps you want to look at targeting different audiences. So these are some of the strategic questions that you can ask yourself when you're kind of doing a thorough brand monitoring. So we're going back to Skittles. We're using this example. Skittles is a big brand. Many people know about Skittles. So, there is a lot of data out there for social listening. So first of all, social listening can help you to understand actual user consumption habits and how people really perceive your products or services. So you may discover some new use cases or relationships with your product that you weren't aware of before. So here are a few examples that we identified by doing the social listening analysis of Skittles. First of all, we're seeing this love-hate relationship, which is something as a brand that maybe you want to be aware of when you're communicating in a responsible way. We're seeing that Skittles is often being associated as a comfort snack. This, again, can help you to kind of shape and form your identity and your communication strategy around this kind of relationship that people have with your product. We see as well brand rivalry. So Starburst versus Skittles, which is apparently a hot debate on the internet, which I was not aware of before doing this analysis. So this might help you to identify kind of your main competitors in this space as well, or find a way to jump on that conversation and kind of take advantage of it, play with it a little bit, since your audience are already talking about it. On the next slide, we'll see some of the more creative ways people are using Skittles as well. So, Skittles as a brand can kind of take these little examples. They can see whether this is going to influence their communications as well. Perhaps they want to repost it as interesting user-generated content. So we're seeing Skittles being used in the context of family games, science experiments, pizza toppings with a big question mark next to it. So, these are all very interesting ways of people using Skittles. And the next part, which is very important, especially if you are a big brand, because the bigger the brand you are, the more you become a point of cultural reference. This can be positive, this can be negative, it might even be neutral. In some instances, it could be portrayed in an ironic way. But understanding the nuances of how social media and how your audience is transforming your brand into a meme, for example, can make sure that you don't slip up if you do decide to join the online conversation. So one of the interesting comparisons that we took out of the social listening analysis was that people are often comparing Skittles to drugs. They're shaped like pills. Often people find them quite addictive as they're sweet and they make you feel good. But obviously, as a brand who is perhaps targeting children or adolescents with their products, this is the kind of relationship that should be on their radar. Brands, they kind of need to think about what is harmless in the space of social media, or what should be perhaps addressed with a counteractive communications or PR strategy. But in general, following the wider conversation is going to help with this, and at least knowing what's going on and knowing how your brand is perceived is definitely a good starting point. And kind of the last area coming out of brand monitoring, which is reputation management. This is a use case that many of our clients are using Mention for. What we're seeing here after doing the analysis of Skittles is a big spike in negative mentions on around November 19th and 20th. So when we investigated this further, we saw that it was actually related to the judge ruling of Kyle Rittenhouse in the United States. So while actually Skittles were not directly implicated in the situation, they were not having a product crisis. It was not related to anything specifically to do with Skittles. But it was important to understand that Skittles actually became a point of reference in the Trayvon Martin case, who was unfortunately shot in the United States holding a bag of Skittles at the same time. So Skittles has become kind of involved in this incident just by pure chance. So then it's up to them as a brand to make the choice whether they want to involve themselves in some way, if they want to publicly support the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been heavily surrounded this case, or do they want to remain silent on the topic? You know, there are advantages and disadvantages of all of these approaches, and there's not a right or wrong answer for brands. It's just about kind of addressing the space and seeing what their audience are expecting, which can definitely come out of an analysis like this. So the next area of monitoring that you can achieve with social listening is topic monitoring. So I would say this is very advantageous if you're looking to expand your reach beyond your current audience. You know, brand monitoring was really good for seeing what your audience are saying about you right now, but perhaps you want to reach new people who you know are interested in kind of similar topics as your audience. So this is one way that you can do that. Secondly, you can also get inspiration for new content. You can see what people are posting about this topic. Perhaps you would want to repost, repurpose, or share this as user-generated content. So these are all the things that you can achieve with topic monitoring. So on the next slide, we see we are actually tracking the conversation around baking. Perhaps it would be that people who are interested in Skittles are also interested in baking. So this is kind of an area, an audience area that we want to monitor, we want to see more of. So during this analysis, we're looking at the mention volume of people talking about baking, specifically baking cakes. We can see the frequency of which this topic is being talked about. So what's quite interesting here is that we often expect baking to be a more weekend activity, something that perhaps you do on a Sunday when everything's closed and you've got a little bit of downtime. But what we're seeing here actually is that there are spikes and peaks on a weekly basis of people talking about baking, but in the middle of the week. So towards Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and actually at the weekend, we're seeing these little dips in activity. So it's quite interesting if you do want to reach this audience who are interested in baking, but perhaps the best time to post might be in the middle of the week and not on the weekend. And if we were to kind of extrapolate this and do an analysis over a longer period of time, say, for example, over the course of 1 year, we'd be able to see whether this topic has a seasonal trend, whether people are talking about baking more around the Christmas period, if there are kind of peaks or troughs over the year. So it's very interesting to kind of get a gauge of how this audience are talking about this topic. And last, we're going into influencer monitoring. So first of all, I wanted to kind of clear up this misconception that, you know, an influencer has to be, you know, a person on Instagram who takes a lot of selfies, goes traveling a lot. This is not necessarily the case. Actually, we can define an influencer just by any individual, any group, or even another brand that your audience trusts and allows their opinions or decisions to be influenced by. So anyone can have influence over our audience, including our competitors. And actually, we would monitor our influencers in a similar way to how we would monitor our own brand. But first of all, we need to identify these influencers. Using the dashboards on Similarweb can definitely help with that as well. But looking more over our social media influencers, we can see with the mention tool, this is a very easy way to find some of the key influencers who are frequently talking about our brand, or perhaps even a topic in our audience's sphere of interest. So what we're seeing here is quite interesting. I actually filtered out a lot of the mentions from after the 19th of November, as we did have a lot of high profile people talking about the Trayvon Martin case, which for a brand reputation or kind of a brand monitoring side is perhaps a little bit less relevant and not what we're looking for right now. So what we're seeing here is that we've got a list of people who have kind of interacted or talked about Skittles or are regularly talking about sweets, talking about food. What's very interesting is, you can then select one or many of these key influencers. You can monitor them in depth. You can see how they're influencing techniques, their approach, how they are talking about your brand, or even you might want to follow up with them on more paid influencer or affiliate campaigns to kind of take advantage of this relationship they have with their audience already. So the last section that I'm going to go into very quickly is just, how are you then putting these insights into practice? Social listening can help you with all areas of your content production, promotion, and tracking afterwards. It can really help to create this deep connection with your audience, the content that you're producing. So the first point, social listening for better content production. What social listening can help you to do is to answer your audience's problems and main concerns using content. So, by tracking the online conversation and seeing what they're talking about, you can kind of see these recurring themes, these recurring questions that your audience might have. And then you can answer that through a blog post, through an informative video, through whatever content means makes sense to you and to your audience. You see what topics capture their interest and what they engage with the most. And you can even see, what kind of formats they like. Is it video? Is it short form video? Is it longer video? Are they into blog posts? Are they regularly resharing kind of visuals? Is it memes? You'll get a better understanding of the types of content that your audience likes by social listening. The next part, moving to the slide after this. Yeah, that's the one. So yeah, social listening for better content promotion. So not only are you able to create the best fitting content for your audience, you can also select the correct channels to promote your content on. So you can see where your audience are spending the most time on, where they're interacting with the most, and then you can prioritize these channels in your promotion strategy. And then moving on from the influencer monitoring, you can also work with those influencers who your audience listens to. And lastly, using social listening for your campaign tracking. So of course, you want to see the larger reach of your content pieces. How is the conversation happening around your content campaigns? What is the buzz like? How are people responding to it? A lot of people have opinions and they like to share their opinions on the internet and very rarely come back to us directly as brands to tell us their thoughts on things. So, this kind of indirect feedback, whether it's good or bad, whether it's positive or critical, these insights can really help to inform your future strategy and what you do with content moving on from here. It's all a learning process, and social listening can really help you to kind of track and to kind of learn from these from content that you've already produced and that you've already shared. So that's it from the social listening side. Just going to pass you back to Chloe now to wrap everything up. And thank you very much. And don't forget to ask all of your questions in the chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fran. I certainly learned a bit more about Skittles that I hadn't learned before. And yes, big question mark on Skittles as a pizza topping. But that was great. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. And as Fran said, to wrap up and recap today's session, this is the couple of the pillars that and the framework on using audience insights to really grow your brand. So first one was to identify that audience. So look at what their interests are online and what they're doing and searching for online. Secondly, it was qualifying that audience. So analyzing which sites that they actually capture your audience attention, identifying their cross-browsing behavior, and also looking at what they talk about on social media and using tools like Mention to be able to do that. And then also looking at your competitors and seeing what sites they're already working with at the moment. Finally, it was monitoring your audience, so making sure you can build dashboards and really analyze the audience insights over time, and also go deeper with those detailed analysis. So whether you're using both Similarweb and Mention together or separately, just make sure that you're always monitoring what your audience is doing online and where you might be able to find new audiences to grow your brand. So that pretty much wraps us up. We've actually got time for a few questions, and I can see that there is a couple that have come through before. Oh yeah, there's this one. So this one's about Similarweb, so I guess I'll take that one. Someone's asking about Similarweb data and particularly around why it offers a better alternative to traditional market research insights. So your normal primary or secondary research. So I think that's a really great question, because as marketers, we need to understand our own audience so that we can make sure that we have the right target audience, the right time with the right message. But as I mentioned earlier, traditional ways of market research can often take a lot of time and resource, and with the way the market is changing, it's really hard to be able to adapt to see if your message is landing. So not having these right tools like Similarweb and Mention, there is really no way of knowing. So Similarweb is quite different from surveys, polls, and other market research methods, because it really gives you the real picture of what's happening online, and really the pulse of the consumers that are on the online and going to different sites and social media. So often survey responses are not always aligned with what a respondent does or says they'll do online, and that can be based on smaller or limited sample sizes or industry reports that are really based on outdated data, and the market has already moved on. But with Similarweb, you can really dig into the data right away in almost real time to see where they're spending their time and their money online, which is really just quite invaluable to a marketeer that needs to know what their audience is doing online, how to profile them better, and really just have a data-driven approach to their go-to-market strategy. And there's another question that's come through. Speaking of audience insights, how do we make positive insights from the audience through our content, and what kind of content or structure of contents can we craft in order to attract an audience globally? So I think, Fran, that's one for you, definitely, as the content superstar. Go for it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question. So I would say that, measuring how successful a piece of content has been, it doesn't rely on a single metric. But I would say one of the most important kind of indicators of how your audience is related to it is, how often it's being shared online. So, whether that's directly through social media, from person to person, if they shared it in a WhatsApp link. So, what's then important when you're kind of designing your content ecosystem is, having a defined place either on your website for your non-social media content, for example, ebooks, blog posts, videos, a place for it to live that can, first of all, be easily shared just with a permalink. And also be easily tracked through analytics tools, Google Analytics and the like, so you can really see their reach, and you can see how far they've gone and where they've been shared. As for the kind of content to craft, I would say honestly, it completely depends on your audience. It depends on what they're expecting. Doing this kind of analysis with Similarweb and with Mention, doing your research first, and make sure that you're in line with their expectations. One of the tips that I would give, if you're still, not really sure on what type of content, what format, I would say try to cover, different formats, have your content in multiple formats, whether it's written, short form video, kind of visual infographics, and post it on kind of a wide variety of channels that your audience are already using. This is the best way of kind of addressing as many people as you can.
Excellent, really good tips there. Thank you. So we've kind of come to the close. We've got a few final thoughts. So we've got some resources to get you started. So keeping in timely, we've got a holiday campaigns to make lasting impact. So this is a collaboration between Similarweb and Mention. And why I mention that it's timely is that, right coming up to the holiday season. So you might get some great tips there as well, particularly around capturing that audience that you want to attract for your holiday campaign. So feel free to download that. And we also have our Similarweb audience growth. So this is our playbook. So this will have a lot more top tips on using Similarweb to understand your audience better and to grow your brand. But that is it for today. I want to thank Fran again for her time today and sharing all those insights. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you for having me. It was really great being online with you.
Excellent. And for those that are online or those watching the recap and on demand, we're here to help. So if you're interested in growing your brand and your audience, or you want to learn more about how you can use Similarweb to do this, then please do get in contact with us and book a demo, or you can even sign up for a trial as well to get started right away. But that's it. That brings us this session, this masterclass to a close. Have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be. And we can't wait to see you next time. Thanks again.